What's up, people? Welcome to another exciting installment of the Black and Gold Hour podcast. It's your host, Merv, and thank you guys for checking out the show. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, for subscribing, for leaving comments. Your support is really appreciated. We definitely want to continue to grow and build the family. But today, we have someone that's known by many in the whodatnation community, whether you've read his articles, watched his videos, next week you'll be watching his training camp updates during your workday. We have senior writer for neworleanssaints.com, John Deshazier. How are you today?
I'm great, Mervin. How you doing, brother?
Good. And thank you for coming on today, because we're at that time of the summer where, we're getting a little anxious. We're ready for the season, and we want to talk Saints football. And with the NBA Finals ending last night, it's time for football. So first and foremost, when I have a guest on the show, especially someone that's known around whodatnation community, and the Pelicans as well, I want to ask, what gave you your passion for sports, and what led to you being a senior writer for both the NBA and the NFL?
Well, I grew up, three older brothers. So that kind of, developed the love for sports. You're always being competitive with them, and especially the youngest brothers, the guy they beat and, push behind and try to leave you all the time. So you gotta keep up with them. And so I played a little high school basketball. I played a little college basketball at Georgia College and State University. And, once I realized, I wasn't going to be a Jordan, I figured, here's the next best thing. So I was a writer. I've always loved writing. I've kept up, read a lot and all that kind of stuff. So transitioned over to a journalism major. And from there, it just kind of took off, man. Just been really blessed. Worked in my hometown paper, the Macon Telegraph and News, for a while. I moved here to New Orleans. I started working for the Times-Picayune at the time. The New Orleans Times-Picayune. Now it's the Advocate. But the Times-Picayune at the time, I worked there for 20 years. I moved in 92 and worked there until 2012 as a beat writer and columnist. And so that's kind of how I got here, and been really fortunate, man. I covered the Saints and everything else New Orleans. So I've been here and seen some of the best of times and some of the worst of times. I saw some of the years, and man. But I did see the Super Bowl year, and now so once I was at the paper until 2012, I got an offer to actually transition over to be the color analyst for the then New Orleans Hornets. And so I took that offer, moved over to the organization, switched over, and then a year after that, they decided that they wanted to kind of beef up what they do in terms of their Saints coverage online. And so then they offered me a position of being the senior writer for the Saints and maintaining the job as the Pelicans color analyst. So I can't beat that, man. It's a kid in a candy store, really, to be able to do those things and somebody pay you to do it. And so I was able to, and they worked with me with the schedule. I can't do both at the same time. They're real generous with working around my schedule. It's Saints primary. Whatever the Saints are doing, that's number one on my list. And then I'm able to pick up and get full into the Pelicans, after the Saints are complete, and hopefully, ride the Pelicans into the playoffs. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that for a couple of years, but, have been able to do that in the past a couple of times. So, it's a generous situation. It's a blessed situation, man. I couldn't be more happy with what I'm doing. The old saying is, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And
right.
And there are a lot of days I don't feel like I work, man. It's just something. It's the labor of love. It's something that I really enjoy doing. So I'm fortunate and I'm blessed, man.
And we're blessed to read all your content too. I don't know about all the Saints fans, but I've been reading your content for a long time. Like during class, during study hall, I was reading it all. Like just getting myself prepared for the Sunday's matchup, and it gets me hype and it keeps me updated on the team. And on Twitter as well, when you're up there and you're talking about Saints news, it really gives you that, keeps you informed as a fan. But I want to ask you, you mentioned the Super Bowl. You covered NCAA, you've covered NBA finals. I want to ask you, what's one memorable moment you have covering sports?
Oh, well, I've got two memorable ones. I'll say the top of the list is the dome reopening. That's always got to be at the top of the list because it was so emotional, and just the lift that the city was in need of at that time for the dome to reopen, and the Saints, forget even winning the game. I mean, that was kind of the icing on the cake, but just to basically turn the lights on and to let the world know, hey man, New Orleans is back up and in business. Might still be kind of, staggered a little bit, might still be on the knees actually, but New Orleans is back on the rise and New Orleans is gonna come back. So that one was huge, man. That one was so huge. And then the other one is the Jordan jumper against Utah. I was in Utah for the Jordan jumper, and the biggest memory with that is they were, it was game 6. Had the Bulls not won that game, had Jordan not made that jumper, I'd have been in Utah for my son's birthday. So Jordan makes the jumper. He makes the jumper. My son's birthday is like a couple of days away. I'm able to finish up everything I got to do and go home and make my son's birthday. That was the biggest thing to me because I hadn't, he was young then, and I hadn't missed any of his birthdays. I really didn't want to miss that one. And so Jordan's jumper, I remember it as much for the jumper as I do for being able to get home to my son's birthday.
Right. So thank Michael Jordan. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I owe him. If I ever, when I see him, if I ever get up close to him, I'm going to be like, hey man, I appreciate you.
And as a young sports fan, that's still one of, like, when I go back and watch the Michael Jordan, that's one of the coldest, like, clutch shots I've ever seen, if not the most clutch. But let's talk about that dome reopening. That kind of set the tone for the next 15 years. The Saints, the energy changed. The Saints became one of the household names. Actually, I grew up in Virginia. You started seeing Saints fans all over the place. And my dad, being born and raised in New Orleans, he would say, son, he would look at me and be like, you would have never saw this about 10, 15 years ago. So now it's a new era in New Orleans, and we have the post Drew Brees era. And let's kind of start with the big news of the week. We talked about Kwon Alexander all offseason working out in Saints gear, kind of getting back, recovering from his Achilles injury. And I want to ask you, he's set to visit with the Saints. Do you believe the Saints are truly interested in bringing him back? Because I know there's other teams interested. And then I want to ask you, how much do you believe they're going to be willing to pay someone with his injury history?
Well, absolutely. I think they're interested because they're taking a look at him, and because of how well he played when he was with the Saints. And I think the interest has to be mutual because he worked in a system that seemed to fit his talents to a T, especially when he was the running mate for Demario Davis at linebacker. So I think the mutual interest is there. The problem is, obviously, is with Kwon is availability, and that always affects salary. I always say the most important ability is availability. You can be the greatest player on earth, but if you ain't there, then it doesn't matter a whole lot. So, that's the thing with Kwon. He is a fantastic player, but he's had a propensity to accumulate injuries over his career. So the interest is there. The interest is mutual. I saw where, doctor cleared him for football activities. I don't know how deep he can get into and when he'll be ready to get back on the field, but the interest has got to be there because even though the Saints have Demario Davis, they've got 2 young linebackers that I think they like a lot in Kwon, who they drafted last year, and Pete Werner, who they drafted this year. But Kwon Alexander is a known NFL commodity. He is a dude that you can put out there and you can say, go get him, and Kwon can go get it. And so it's rare to have that kind of guy. But again, the injuries are always going to affect a situation like that salary-wise because you have to put in incentives because you don't know how available he's going to be. But I think the interest there is mutual. I think it would be strong. It would be silly for it not to be. I think Kwon, if he had his choice, he absolutely would want to come back to the Saints because he knows the system. He would have to adjust to a new system. He played well in the system, and he would have an opportunity, if he's healthy, to hit those incentives probably because he is a guy who was stacking up some nice numbers for the Saints until he ruptured that Achilles. it'll be great to see him back in the NFL, period. It'd be absolutely wonderful to see him back healthy as a Saint. And I know that, you don't want to stunt the growth of those young linebackers, but it's all about competition. If you're good enough, you'll be on the field one way or the other, whether it's special teams, whether it's at the linebacker, whether it's in some of the sub packages. And DeMario and Kwon can't play every down, so you get an opportunity to play in those situations also. But, Kwon Alexander has shown when he's healthy, he can ball when he's healthy. But that's always the caveat. He's got to be healthy. And so hopefully he is on that road to being healthy.
And I mean, when Kwon came to the team last season, it was a noticeable change. Like, you saw him and Demario Davis running East Coast to West Coast all over the field. Dude
came in on early in the week and started that weekend. That tells you the kind of ability he had. I mean, that tells you the kind of player he is. I mean, he's smart. It takes more than athleticism to play in the NFL, but he started on short notice immediately and didn't come out of the lineup and contributed and made an impact immediately. It's hard to find those kinds of guys. It's hard to find them.
It's times where you'll watch you'll see the whole Saints defense, and there's players who get lost. He was the type of player, you hear his name on the intercom the whole game. I mean, the Saints have to be. I'm glad the interest is mutual, and I'm happy to see him coming back, visiting with the Saints, and hopefully the Saints pick him up. But let's kind of stay on the defensive end. You wrote an article last month about David Onyemata. Talked about how he was consistent. One of those players we hear on the intercom all game long. His leadership role maybe taking a step up. But he was suspended for the first 6 games of the season. Yeah. And I want to ask you, in your opinion, where do you think the Saints turn to for answers during his suspension? I mean, we do have defensive tackle free agents. You have Geno Atkins, you have Jarrell Casey, but we also have Shai Tuttle and Malcolm Roach. Do they stick with what they have, or do they look elsewhere for some answers?
Well, I think you got to add some depth. And I mean, I know Shai Tuttle and Roach will get the first looks, and you might even be able to shuffle in, Carl Granderson in there for some snaps. You might be able to move Cam Jordan over at defensive tackle for some snaps. But I think they're going to kick the tires on all of that, whether it's, Geno Atkins, whoever it is. You've got to explore, because David Onyemata is huge, man. That's a huge, significant loss. And I know that maybe outside of New Orleans, or maybe outside of Saints fans, he probably isn't as appreciated or as maybe he could be if he played on a. But I mean, that dude is a big factor in what the Saints do. He can wreck an offense single-handedly in the middle. He can, and I've seen him do it. We've all seen him do it. He spends a lot of time in the backfield. It might not be, for 8 tackles, but he's back there disrupting stuff the whole game long. So that's a big, big loss. And where do you make that up? You can't expect Shai Tuttle to do that because he hadn't been that kind of player, and David has. So that's a big loss for the Saints. But you kick the tires on everything. You gotta kick the tires on everything now, because you got to see if you can replace, if not the production, the presence. He had some production last year, and it looked like it was going to be on the rise. I think he had 6.5 sacks last year, and that's significant for a defensive tackle. So his production is going up. But if you can't reproduce the production, you got to have somebody in there who can give you a presence like him. You can't just have somebody in there where you can't stuff the run. He could do that. You can't have somebody in there who can't apply that middle of the pocket pressure. He could do that. So you need to have someone who can do that. It'll be a great opportunity for the young guys to have a chance to go out there and prove it. And it won't necessarily be, I don't want to say it'll be overwhelming for him, because you do have Cam Jordan on at defensive end. You do hopefully Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner at the other defensive end, and Carl Roach. So if you get that outside pressure, that will help the guys inside, because if you got a double on the ends, and Cam's going to get doubled. If you got a double on the ends, that'll free up some guys for some one-on-one situations, you hope, in the middle. And that hopefully, if you win that one-on-one matchup, you're closer to the quarterback, you're closer to the running back, you can get some things done in there. Those young guys, they'll have some opportunities to prove how good they are. But, trust me, the Saints are going to kick the tires on everybody who's out there, because you're always looking to improve. And when you lose a guy as valuable and as good as David Onyemata for 6 games, man, that's a long time to be without, your maybe third or fourth best defensive player. And then, look, I say third or fourth best. There are Sundays when David Onyemata is the best defensive player the Saints had. There are several Sundays where he is the best defensive player on the field for the Saints. That's a big loss.
And when we talked about this upcoming training camp, when we talked about the training camp battles that we saw, we did not think defensive tackle would be one of them. But now going into it, we're going to be trying to see, like you said, how these young players step up. You got Shy Tuttle, Malcolm Moore, you got so many players. How are they going to step up with his absence? And like you said, there's plenty of Sundays where David Onyemata is the best player on the defense. And I like how you talked about his presence. And when thinking about the word presence, I kind of want to ask you a question that is specific to you, because you've been around the guys, you've been around the team. And as we enter the first year without Drew Brees, we know the presence he brought to the locker room. You know, the work ethic that he played with, the focus that he played with each Sunday. And, the last few years, the Saints have played with a swagger. Now that Brees is gone, over the last season or two, who have you seen on the Saints roster that can take his place and add that, for lack of a better word, swagger to the team and presence in the locker room?
Oh, that's the Mario Davis. That's your guy. That's your guy, Mario Davis. Teron Armstead, who has kind of been groomed for this situation. He was Teron. I remember when we came into the NFL, shy guy, soft-spoken, short answers, kind of looking down, and now he has grown into a tremendous leader. And you can only do that out of performance. I mean, you got to put out for guys to listen to you. So Teron Armstead, Mario Davis, Alvin Kamara. Now Alvin's not a vocal leader all the time, but when he says something, it means something. So he's one of those kinds of guys. So you look for him. Of course, Cam Jordan. Cam. Cam will say a whole lot of stuff that don't make a lot of sense all the time. But Cam also can get serious, and when he's serious, he means business. So, but I think the natural guys are DeMario Davis, because remember a couple of years ago when Drew injured his thumb and they were looking for somebody to lead the pregame huddle, DeMario was a natural. He is a motivational guy. He is a baller, and he will fit that role nicely. And Teron, I think those two guys will hit those roles real nicely. And I almost feel embarrassed for forgetting the guy, Malcolm Jenkins, who is not just a statesman for the NFL, but certainly a statesman for the Saints, and dude who can still play. He still got ball in him. So they got 3 really good ones. Now, of course, Drew Brees has been the face of the franchise since 2006. And, it was going to be Reggie Bush in 2006 because he was the number 2 overall pick, and Reggie was, the Heisman Trophy winner and flashy. It turned out to be Drew Brees, and he's been the face of the franchise since 2006. But I think they got some real good guys who can take over that role, that leadership role, if face of the franchise. Because the face of the franchise now is probably a dude with locks and a grill, and that's probably Alvin Kamara, the franchise right now. But they got some guys who can fill that leadership void that you lose with Brees.
Right. And we started to see when Brees went down with injury, we saw DeMario Davis take over the chant. We saw the team kind of play with an extra gear. So it definitely, DeMario Davis is one of the best, free agent signings we had in the last few years. And I'm excited to see what he does. And hopefully he has Kwon back. So let me ask you, when you talk about leadership in the locker room, you can't go without saying the quarterback position. And there is going to be a training camp battle between Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. And last year, Taysom Hill got the start over Jameis Winston, and it proved without a shadow of a doubt that Sean Payton believes in Taysom Hill. So I want to ask you, with this upcoming training camp battle between the quarterbacks, do you believe that Taysom Hill has a legitimate shot to be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints?
Well, I do. I think it's going to be a legitimate battle, but also when I reflect back on last year and Taysom Hill starting those 4 games when Brees was out, I always go back to the offseason where COVID-19 affected and you didn't get the usual offseason work. And I think that hurt Jameis Winston as much as it hurt any player in the NFL, because he didn't get a chance to get those offseason reps with his teammates, whether it's OTAs, mini camps, all of that work that you get to kind of build some camaraderie and build some chemistry. he didn't get any of that work with his teammates. And so he had to try to kind of get it all on the fly in training camp. And that's a hard thing to do when you're splitting reps and your starters probably getting the lion's share of the reps. And now you got Taysom Hill, who knows the offense better than you do if you're Jameis Winston. And so now you're trying to make the most of those reps. And you probably press a little bit because you know there's limited reps to be had because you hadn't had that other work to show what you can do. So now he gets the opportunity. We know he's been working out with his receivers this offseason. So you build that chemistry. You get in sync with them. You kind of figure out, okay, this is how I like to do it. How I like you to run this route, and I want you to be here. You can kind of get those things down a little bit. So now when you come to training camp, and they've had a little mini camp, now when you get to training camp, Jameis Winston isn't nearly as far behind. Now, is Taysom going to have a legitimate shot? They say there's going to be a competition, and competition makes people better. So I feel like he's going to have a legitimate shot. But Jameis Winston, you got to remember, he's the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft for a reason. He's got an arm. It's hard to say a lot of people in the NFL have. He can throw that thing. And so, if he's learned what he says he's learned from watching Drew Brees last year, which is not so much the things to do all the time, but a lot of times it's what not to do. Don't throw it in situations where you can throw it away and live to fight another day. You can turn it over to your defense. Let your defense go out there and hopefully get a 3 and out or force a punt or whatever. Get the ball back. You'll have another opportunity. Whereas I think sometimes in Tampa, he pressed it a little bit. Defense probably wasn't as good as the Saints defense. Felt like he had to score on so many possessions and probably was a lot more risky. Now you get with the Saints and you say, okay, if all else fails, I can dump it to 41 in the flat, Alvin Kamara, and let him work a little magic. And if he can't work some magic again, we can punt it and come back out here and try it again. So that's a whole different mindset. I think sitting and watching Drew Brees last year benefited him immensely mentally in terms of what you shouldn't do a lot of times and not force it. You don't have to force it. You can be patient. You can live to fight another down. You don't have to just risk it all the time. So I think it benefited him greatly. I'm really, really anxious to see that competition. That's going to make a training camp worth it, man. Guys, go out there because, we're grading, we don't grade the same way the coaching staff does, of course. Right. They've got a lot more knowledge than we do. But, you just go by the eye test in training camp and you see what those guys are doing. And it's going to be great to see it because you've always, since 2006, you've always known going into training camp, Drew Brees is going to be the quarterback. Who's going to be backup? Drew Brees is going to be the quarterback. Who's going to be number 3? Something like that. But now here is a genuine competition. So, man, the adrenaline's flowing just for that.
And I want to ask you, just to piggyback off this conversation, you have Jameis and you have Taysom. Whoever starts is still going to be a first-time starter with the New Orleans Saints for the entire season. In your opinion, I want to ask you this because this is something that's kind of been on my mind all offseason. Do you believe the Saints, regardless of who becomes quarterback, should focus more on their workhorse, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, and become more of a consistently stick to the running game? Or do you believe that with Jameis Winston, if he does become the starter, we're going back to the high flying offense we saw, between 2007 and 2016? Are we going back to that?
That's a good question, and I think it's one of those things where I guess it depends on the Sunday. I will always believe you do what it takes to win that game that day. So if it takes running 40 times and throwing 28, then that's what you do. If it takes throwing 42 and running 25, then that's what you do. Now, Alvin is a guy who gets touches more so than carries. You know what I'm saying? He might get 12, 14 carries, but he might end up with 22 touches because he's got the 8 catches. So I think you'll see that out of Alvin, of course, because you don't want to wear him down. You don't want to get him all beat up and bruised up and that kind of stuff. But he's such a weapon that you got to get the ball in his hands. Now, Latavius, I think there'll be a lot of times where the Saints will say, you know what, we can just run it on folks because they've invested a lot in that offensive line, man. They put a lot of money and a lot of development into that offensive line with Teron Armstead and Andrews Pete. and Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz and Ryan Ramczyk. That's a lot of talent right there. High picks. So if you just need to grind it out, and those guys love it when the Saints just say, okay, we're going to run it down your throat. Nobody likes it more than they do. So I think there will be some games where the Saints just say, you know what? We don't need to throw it a whole lot. We'll just run it a lot. We can rely on defense. We'll throw it strategically and see what happens that Sunday. And you can win that way in the NFL. It's been shown that you can win that way in the NFL. You look at the Tennessee Titans, you can win like that in the NFL.
and I like how you bring up the Tennessee Titans, because we'll watch Derrick. The whole world knows that Derrick Henry is about to get the ball. They still give it to him, and he still produces. And sometimes when I watch the Saints, you'll see Alvin Kamara rip off an 8-yard run, and then he's running to the sideline. So it's like the Saints defense is so many pieces, so many working pieces. I'm excited to see how they shift that gear with the new quarterback, with Jameis, or even Taysom getting the reins on the team. So I want to ask you, let's go back to the defense. We talked about Marshon Lattimore earlier this offseason, and he got into a little situation. But the Saints in the 3rd round drafted Paulson Adebo out of Stanford. I want to ask you, with the recent talks about Richard Sherman with the Saints, or potentially Xavier Howard, where do you think the Saints go for that number 2 corner? Is it Paulson Adebo, or do you think they're looking elsewhere?
Well, again, they're always looking. And if it's not Paulson Adebo, you know, that's a tough thing to ask a rookie to come out and do, especially a rookie who's kind of catching up some, because he didn't play last year in the Pac-12. He stayed out because of COVID-related reasons, and he opted out of the season. So he's got a lot of catching up to do. And especially now you're talking about catching up against NFL caliber competition, which is a jump up from any conference in America. I don't care where you play, jump up in the NFL. So is Paulson Adebo ready for that duty? Whether you like him, he's a long cornerback. He's got some good ball skills. He's a guy who looks like he might be able to play there. You know, do you want to use Patrick Robinson there? You know, you can get some play out of P-Rob there. You know, you can get some play out of P.J. Williams there. But, you know, the Saints are always kicking the tires on some other guys. And, you know, Richard Sherman is a free agent. You hear about the Howard kid in Miami, and that situation, you know, you don't know how that's going to play out with them. But they're always looking to upgrade, because, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, you know, around the league. You don't necessarily know right now for the Saints. You know, nothing's been decided definitively with Marshon Lattimore from the league. So you don't know how that situation is going to play out either. So it could be a situation where, you know, you possibly could be without your 2 starters from last year. You know, Jack Rabbit Jenkins is already gone. Marshon Lattimore possibly, you know, league discipline. You don't know yet. You could be without both your starting cornerbacks to begin this season. So where do you get those snaps from? And can you hold down the fort until you get what you want, especially at that other cornerback spot? That's going to be another one that's going to be really interesting to watch, because, you know, sometimes you can get a guy who can come in as even an undrafted free agent. Ken Crawley a couple of years ago. But eventually, you know, you got to get a guy who can stand up to the pressure every game, every down, and can bounce back from losing some battles here and there. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way with Ken Crawley. You know, he looked great for a season, and then the next season didn't look so good. You know, do the Saints have that guy in Paulson Adebo? Well, they drafted him in the 3rd round, and 3rd round draft picks are expected to play in the NFL. 3rd round draft picks a lot of times are expected to start in the NFL. So, you know, he's a guy that they looked at him. They know his coach, David Shaw, and I'm sure David Shaw told him, oh, this is, you know, David Shaw was an NFL coach. So he understands what it takes to be in the NFL. And if he says Paulson Adebo is a guy who's capable and he's high on him, then you have to believe Paulson Adebo is capable.
Right. And we watched Paulson Adebo's, you know, highlights. We saw the one-handed interceptions. We're seeing so much athleticism, and we know that Dennis Allen likes the athletic secondary players, and that's the trend in the NFL. So it's still, like you said, it still is a lot for to ask a first-year player, especially in a division with so many elite wide receivers. I mean, it's a lot going on in the NFC South. You got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, you got Antonio Brown. It's a lot going on. And I'm excited to see, hopefully the Saints do look elsewhere just for that added depth. Not saying that Paulson Adebo can't do it, because I'm excited to see what he can do. He looks like he has that NFL athleticism. So we want to see how he takes the next step to the NFL level. But we'll begin to see all of these things start to shape out as we get into training camp and as the regular season gets closer. But as we close, I want to ask you, you've been around the team for years. You've talked to the players, you've done interviews with the players, and now we're entering the post Drew Brees era. If you can go back, can you tell us your favorite Drew Brees moment, maybe as a fan or even as a reporter?
You know, I think he's done so much. So the installation of him, and really the thing that's out for me right now is almost every time he broke an NFL record or something, it wasn't with his quote unquote number one receiver. So it was like a Devery Henderson or a Josh Hill. I think he broke the touchdown record throwing a touchdown to Josh Hill. I think he broke the yards record. I think it was a pass to Traquan Smith. It was one of those things where he threw to the open guy. I don't care who that open guy was. He trusted the open guy. And so Drew Brees made a lot of guys a lot more confident in themselves, because he said, look, if you get open, I'm going to throw it to you. I'm not going to always. Now, of course, you know, there are situations where you're going to look for Mike Thomas. You'd be crazy not to. That situation, you're going to look for Marcus Colston. You'd be crazy not to. I mean, situations where you look for Jimmy Graham. You'd be crazy not to. But a lot of those records were with guys that you wouldn't necessarily believe that he was looking for, and it'd just be, you know what, that's the open guy on this play, and that's who I'm going to throw it to. And he always reminded me, he always, you know, struck me as that kind of guy who, okay, I don't know, you know, I need everybody to run the route you're supposed to because you're live. You can't loaf because you might be the guy. So I don't care where you are in the progression. I need you to do what your job is because you might turn out to be the guy. And that always struck me with him.
Right. And he made some players out of these Saints wide receivers over the years. He made, you know, Willie Snead, Lance Moore, one of my favorite Saints players. I mean, the anticipation that he always threw to Lance Moore, always seemed like they were just always on the same page. Like before Lance Moore would even get out to break, the ball was already thrown and it would be caught. Marcus Colston, we know about that, the Jimmy Graham days. And I want to talk about a favorite memory of mine as far as Drew Brees. And it's off the field. I guess it's off the field. We were at Greenbrier, the Greenbrier training camp over those years we spent there. And I'm living in Virginia at the time. And my dad texted me. He's like, Saints are in West Virginia for training camp. I'm like, what?
That's what I
was like, what is going on? You know, usually me and my dad are plotting going to my grandmother's house in New Orleans. We're going to go to training camp that way. But I was like, okay, this is a lot less heat. Let's go there. And we get in the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, you sure the Saints are out here? Like, we're still driving. I'm like, are you sure the Saints are out here? So we get out there and we watch the practice, and you know, it's time for them to sign autographs and just connect with the fans. And you would think someone with Drew Brees, maybe you might do a couple. He walked the entire side and signed as many autographs, took as many pictures, signed as many footballs as he possibly could. And you know, he was getting swarmed. So I just really appreciate that. And I look at that, and I think he did that about 2 of the 3 days we were there. So it was like, it was really nice. And that's one of the memories that I'm always going to remember about Drew Brees, his focus, his dedication, and his love for the fans. I mean, even when he broke the record, I think he broke a record with Darren Sproles. And I remember him just looking up at the fans and just embracing it with the fans. Like, this is our record. And that's something that I'll always remember about Drew Brees. And, you know, it's a new era, and we're excited to see where the Saints go. But I want to thank you, John, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. This has been a great experience. I like this, man. So let's do it again.
Yes. And I'm excited to see, you know, what kind of training camp information you give us next week. I'm going to be checking my phone while I'm at work. I'm like, what's going on, John? and I know other people will as well. But I want to thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Peace.